Hello and welcome back. Okay, I have a question. The first astronauts, do you remember the first astronauts? Were they brave men? Were the first astronauts brave men? When did the first astronauts go into space? When did the first cosmonauts go into space? Cosmonaut is the word we use for the Russian or the Soviet astronauts. I think still today. After the fall of the Iron Curtain, se dice en inglés la cortina de hierro. Antes se decía en castellano el telón de acero. After the fall of the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union slowly disintegrated, and now you have Russia. And even today, I think still for the Russian astronauts, we call them cosmonauts. But here's my question. Were the first astronauts and cosmonauts brave men? The adjective brave doesn't necessarily mean bravo, como un toro bravo. A brave bull. Brave means valeroso, valiente. Okay, brave. That means you're not afraid of danger and you walk into danger. Now, who was the first astronaut or cosmonaut to travel in space? Who was the first astronaut or cosmonaut to go into space? Curiosa forma de hablar en inglés. Dice go into. Como si entrases en una habitación. To go into the room. If I leave this room, this television studio, and I go into the next room, which is the sound control room, okay, we say to go into. And with the astronauts and cosmonauts, we say to go into space. Yeah, como si uno entrase en el espacio exterior. Outer space. Antes se decía mucho outer space. El espacio exterior. Ahora simplemente decimos space. To go into space, have you ever traveled in space? I've never traveled in space. Would you like to travel in space? Would you like to visit the moon? Would you like to spend a few hours or a couple of days walking on the moon? Huh? When I teach English, I always ask my students this question, especially when I'm teaching the expression, would you like, would you like, would you like? Would you like to have a big car? Would you like to have a mansion? Would you like to have $1 million? Would you like to go to the moon? And probably 70 or 80% of my students say, yes, I would like to go to the moon. And then I ask the next question, would you sacrifice the last year of your life in exchange for going to the moon? In exchange for going to the moon? And many of them say yes, but some of them don't understand what I'm saying. And they say, oh, what do you mean? Sacrifice the last year of your life, or my life. And I tell them, well, listen, imagine that God comes down and says to you, Manolo, would you like to go to the moon? And you say, well, of course. Okay. Well, Manolo, you're going to live, and then at some point in the future, you're going to die. It's normal. Everybody dies. Now, the last year of your life, sacrifice it. You will die 1 year younger than it is originally planned. But in exchange, or in return, a cambio, in return, you can go to the moon. Would you sacrifice the last year of your life to go to the moon? I probably wouldn't. For me, así de importante no es. No es tan importante para mí no es. Escuchad como lo digo. For me, it's not that important. It's not that important. It's not that important, really, to go to the moon. I would love to go. I would love to have the opportunity. And if somebody offered me, if the NASA offered me the opportunity to go to the moon, yes, sir. When do I start? I would go right away. But I wouldn't pay for it. And I wouldn't sacrifice the last year of my life to go to the moon, okay? Because it's not that important for me. It's not that important. It's really not that important. Aquí estoy diciendo that, donde en español diríais probablemente no es tan importante. Para mí no es tan importante, no es para tanto. Tan importante no es, okay? And I'm saying that, no estoy diciendo so, porque lo decimos así. So también significa tan, pero suele estar dentro de una frase del tipo, es tan importante para mí que estoy dispuesto a pagar. It's so important for me that I'm willing to pay. It's so, this this room is so cold that my nose is freezing and I can't move my hands well, all right? The lights are so bright that I can't see you very well, okay? This table is so rough, rugosa, that it hurts my hands to pass my hand over, okay? This microphone is so heavy that I can't pick it up. Ahí. Pero luego viene mi amigo y lo levanta, anda, tan pesado no es, eh? No es para tanto. It's not that heavy, come on. It's not that heavy. And this water, oh, wow, this water is so cold. I don't know, you brought me some cold, this would bring me room temperature water. Quiero agua del tiempo. I want room temperature water, not cold water. This water is so cold that I can't drink it. And another person comes and says, a ver, let's see. Ah, come on, it's not that cold. Anda ya. No es para tanto. Tan frío no es. Okay? It's not that cold. All right? Come on. Okay, this book, my God, this book is so thick that I will never finish it. It's so thick that I will never finish it. And my friend comes and says, oh, come on. Come on. Eres muy quejica. You're always complaining. It's not that thick. It's not that thick. Okay? It's not that thick. Okay? Do you understand? All right. So for me, going to the moon would be fantastic. I would love to spend a few hours walking on the surface of the moon. But it's not so important that I would pay to go or that I would sacrifice the last year of my life. It's simply not that important for me. It's not that important for me. The surface, superficie. Sir, como sí, señor. Sir. Así se pronuncia la primera sílaba. No se dice sur, como al norte y al sur. Se dice sir. Yes, sir. Surface. Y no se dice faz o face. Se escribe surface. Se pronuncia sir, yes, sir. Fist. Fist. Casi como puño. Fist. Con una T. Fist. Como una I latina casi. Surface. Prefiero que peques por la I latina que por la A. Surface. The surface of the moon. Yeah, I would like to spend a few hours walking around on the surface of the moon, but I wouldn't sacrifice the last year of my life because it's not that important for me. And I probably wouldn't pay. Maybe if it was 200 euros, yeah, sure, why not? I would pay 200 euros and go up with the astronauts. Very brave men, the astronauts. And the question here, were the first astronauts brave men? Señores o hombres valiosos, valerosos o valientes. Yes, they were, because they didn't know the danger, or they didn't know the degree of the danger. They didn't know how dangerous it was. NASA, the National Aeronautic and Space Administration, had sent monkeys, chimpanzees, I think 2 chimpanzees, into space before Alan Shepard, the first American astronaut, went into space. And the Russians, the Soviets, they didn't send monkeys or chimpanzees into space. They sent dogs into space. Okay? So they had information too before they sent Yuri Gagarin. Okay? Now the first human being, the first man in this case, to go into space was the Soviet cosmonaut, Yuri Gagarin. And I think he went in 1960 or 1961. I really don't remember which year. And it created a shock in the United States. That was the second big shock. The first shock was in 1957 when the Soviets sent Sputnik. It was the first satellite. And it was a very small satellite, about this big. It wasn't very big. But you could see it. You could see it from the Earth orbiting, a light moving across the sky. I remember living in Houston, Texas. In 1957, I was, it depends on the time of the year, because I was born in November. But in 1957, I was 5 years old, or maybe 6, but probably I was 5. And I remember, graphically, lying on the grass. Lying is tumbado. No, también significa mintiendo. No estoy mintiendo. I'm not lying to you. I was lying on the grass in the front yard of my house with my father, I think. And we were looking up at the firmament, at the sky at night. And at that time, you could see all the stars because there weren't so many city lights. And so it was possible to see the Milky Way, la Vía Láctea. We say el camino lechoso, o la vía lechosa. The milk de leche, the Milky Way. And you could see the Milky Way. And I remember my father and I watching Sputnik, como dice aquí, Sputnik, pop, 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 going across the sky. And that created a trauma in the United States and said, my God. At that time, the President of the United States was Dwight Eisenhower, the general from the Second World War. Dwight Eisenhower had been the head of military operations in the European theater in the Second World War. He was the boss of Patton and Montgomery and Bradley and other famous generals, often difficult generals, okay? And Eisenhower was the president, and he was pressured by the Washington establishment to do something. Tenemos que hacer algo al respecto. Estos soviéticos han mandado un satélite. Okay? And so there was a lot of pressure on our good friend Eisenhower, President Eisenhower. And the people were saying, we have to do something about it. We have to do something about it. We must do something about it. Fijaos, about it. Tenemos que hacer algo, decís aquí. Hay que hacer algo. Y si queréis rematarlo, hay que hacer algo al respecto. Pues en inglés, we have to do something, or we have to do something about it. We have to do something about it. So there was pressure. And Eisenhower decided to start the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, la NASA, decís aquí. We just say NASA, NASA. And so he started NASA, and preparations were made to create a space program and to send a person, to send astronauts into space. And one of the first actions, of course, were to choose astronauts. Most of the experts preferred circus performers. That's interesting. A circus performer is a person who performs in the circus. Yeah. A circus performer is a person who performs in the circus. Trapeze artists, we say in English, artistas de trapecio. Trapeze artists, or people who are put in a cannon and shot out of the cannon, or people who do acrobatics, or a lion tamer, which is a domador de leones, who has a chair and a whip. In another class, I asked, why do they use a chair? Okay, these are circus performers. Some people in Washington said, we need circus performers to be the astronauts. And Eisenhower said no. He said, no, I want test pilots, pilotos de prueba, test pilots. And some of the people some of the politicians and functionaries or civil servants, solemos decir sirvientes civiles, más que funcionario. La palabra funcionario existe en inglés, functionary, pero parece muy impersonal, casi como una máquina que funciona. And so we say sirvientes civiles, civil servant. Y el funcionariado o el servicio público, trabajar en la función pública, we say to work in the civil service, okay, which is to be a member of the administration, an employee of the national, local, or regional administration, okay, is what you call a funcionario. So politicians and civil servants said to Eisenhower, test pilots, pilotos de prueba, test pilots, you're crazy. Those are very difficult people. They are prima donnas. Prima donna, son muy creidillos, muy suyos, muy difíciles de manejar. Y cuando hay alguien así que se cree el regalo de Dios a todos, okay, we call those people prima donna. Like in the opera, the most important female singer is la primera mujer, la prima donna, okay, la primera dama. In the opera, But we have translated that. We have transferred that concept into everyday life. And so if there's somebody in your organization who is always very untouchable, the best, we call him a prima donna, okay? And they didn't want the civil servants and the politicians didn't want test pilots. But Eisenhower insisted. He insisted and said, I want test pilots. So a long process that lasted more than a year was initiated to choose 7 astronauts. And the question here is, were the astronauts, the first astronauts, brave men? Yes, they were. 7 men were chosen for the Mercury program to compete against the Soviet cosmonauts. The Soviet space program was better at the beginning. They had a head start. Salieron con ventaja, en tiempo al menos. They had a head start. And the first man to go into space was Yuri Gagarin, a Soviet cosmonaut. And he went up and he orbited the Earth once and then went down and survived, okay? The next person to go into space was Alan Shepard, an American astronaut. And he didn't orbit the Earth. He simply went up from Cabo Cañaveral, Cape Canaveral. Fijaos cómo se pronuncia. Cape Canaveral. Se escribe Cañaveral o Canaveral, pero se pronuncia Canaveral, Cape Canaveral. He went up, entered space for a few minutes, and came back down into the Atlantic Ocean. And the next astronaut, Gus Grissom, the same. Okay. And then the third astronaut, the famous John Glenn, orbited the Earth 3 times. Okay. And then several other astronauts. Yes, so the question, were the astronauts brave men? Yes, they were. Because it wasn't clear at all. It wasn't clear at all who was going up first and second, and it wasn't clear how dangerous it really was. Because on many test launches, the rockets exploded, and the astronauts were watching. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that you're an astronaut, and you're watching a test launching, un lanzamiento de prueba, and the rocket explodes? Huh? 2 weeks later, another test launching, and the rocket explodes. The rockets, los cohetes que fabricaban, at least 3 of them exploded on the launching pad. All right, plataforma de lanzamiento, we say pad, P-A-D. También un bloc para escribir is a pad, a writing pad, or a notepad. Estos blocks para notas, para apuntes, we say a notepad, P-A-D. Y a veces para mi apartamento, oh, ven a mi apartamento, come to my pad, in slang. So the launching pad, can you imagine? And these 7 first astronauts always were present for the test launchings, watching, of course, from a distance of about 1 kilometer. And 3 consecutive times they saw the rocket explode. And they were thinking, someday I'm going to be in that rocket, or in a similar rocket. So yes, were the first astronauts brave men? Yes, they were. Braver than I am, sitting in front of you alone in front of a camera teaching English. Okay? Some people consider me a brave man, but it's not the same. I've been teaching English for 35 years. For me, to teach English is like walking, okay? It's the easiest thing in the world for me because I've been doing it for more than half of my life. So, I don't need to be brave to come sit in front of you and these lights and cameras, etc. Because es un sexto sentido para mí, enseñar inglés. It's a sixth, difícil pronunciar, eh? Sixth sense to teach English. So it doesn't matter if it's cameras and lights, it doesn't matter if it's 20 students, 1 student. For me, teaching English is like walking down the street. Next question, has the Queen of England been in the news lately? I think the Queen of England is in the news almost every day. Yeah. The Queen of England is in the news often. The Queen of England and her son, Prince Charles, is in the news quite often. And the 2 grandchildren, the children of Charles and Diana, all right? They're in the news all the time. Has the Queen of England been in the news lately? Yes, she has. Últimamente, lately. También se puede decir recently, recientemente. Pero siempre aquí se usa el presente perfecto. Has the Queen of England been in the news lately? Yes, she has. How old is the Queen of England? I think she's 80. Creo que cumplió los 80 años hace poco, hace unos meses. I think she turned 80. Turned. En inglés, para cumplir años, tornamos años, o giramos años, curiosamente. To turn, all right, is the word we use for cumplir años. Next November, I will turn 57. I'm getting old. And the Queen of England turned 80 just a few months ago, all right? We have 5 minutes left. All right, so, has she been in the news lately? Yes, she has. How long has the Queen been Queen? How long has she been the Queen of England? She's been the Queen of England, I think, since 1953 or 1954. She was quite young when she became the Queen. She was married, in fact. I don't remember the details, but I think she was on her honeymoon, luna de miel o similar, or she was on a trip with her young husband, Prince Philip, and when her father died a bit unexpectedly. His health was not good, but his death was unexpected. And she came back. And this is 1953 or 1954. And so she's been the Queen for many, many years. Interesting story about the Queen. Every year, there is a tradition in the royal family and in the royal house in England. Every year, the British Crown, the Queen, sends a personal letter of congratulations to every British subject who turns 100. Do you understand? Every British subject, que subject significa el sujeto, ¿no? O un tema, un sujeto, una frase. El sujeto de esta frase es subject. Subject también es súbdito de un reino, okay? Every British subject who turns 100 years old receives a personal congratulatory letter from the Queen. It's a tradition in the British Royal House. Casa Real, Royal House. It's a tradition in the British Royal House. Now, in the 1950s, when Queen Elizabeth II was young, she sent, por cierto, by the way, Queen Elizabeth II is only Queen Elizabeth II in England and in Wales, because in Scotland she is Queen Elizabeth I, because the first Elizabeth, the daughter of Henry VIII, okay, she was not the Queen of Scotland at that time. So really, Queen Elizabeth II, remember, is only England and Wales, not Scotland. All right, but nevertheless, when the Queen was young, in the 50s, every year she sent out approximately 50 congratulatory letters, which meant in all of the British Empire or the British Isles, Islas Británicas, bueno, not in Ireland, but in the United Kingdom, approximately 50 people reached the age of 100, okay? And so a person in 1956, for example, who reached the age of 100, had been born in 1856. Okay, 1 century before, of course. That's a long time. 50 per year. Now, the tradition continues. We're in 2007, 2008, okay? And now, our good Queen Elizabeth every year is sending approximately 1,000 letters of congratulations, which means 20 times more people are reaching the age of 100 than 50 years ago. Now, the people who are receiving these letters, of course, were born in 1907, 1908, before the Titanic sank, etc. So, can you imagine in 50 years, okay, how many people will be receiving congratulatory letters from Queen Elizabeth? Which means people are living longer. Health systems are getting better. Diets are better, which means who knows how much our generation or your generation will live. I don't know. Interesting question. Okay, but I don't have time to finish it. But I'll be back in a few minutes and we'll continue, probably with a different subject, but we'll continue. So don't go too far away. Be right back in 5 minutes' time. Thank you.